Hello everyone, and welcome back to Life Single Review. Today is the day we've all been waiting for, the day that will determine Dee's entire future. And honestly, my heart is racing just thinking about what's about to unfold. I hope you're all doing well and taking care of yourselves, because you're going to need your full attention for this one. This isn't just another episode. This is the courtroom showdown that will decide everything. Let me ask you some questions that have been keeping me up at night. Can Dee really protect his ancestral land against a professional lawyer and a woman who's planned every detail of her attack? What evidence has Thuy manufactured to support her lies? Who will show up as the surprise witness that nobody expected? What dirty tactics will Thuy's lawyer use to twist the truth? And here's the biggest question. Will Mom Sam arrive in time with the proof that could save everything? Or will she be too late? This is it, friends. The moment of truth. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, because you absolutely cannot miss how this plays out. Hit that notification bell, grab something to drink, and settle in. Justice is about to be tested. Let's go to court. In the days leading up to the court date, two very different preparations were taking place. On one side, you had calculated manipulation and expensive legal strategy. On the other, you had desperation, truth, and hope that justice would somehow prevail. Let me show you both sides of this battle. Thuy wasn't taking any chances. She hired lawyer Min, one of the most successful and, let's be honest, most ruthless divorce attorneys in the region. This man had a reputation for winning cases that seemed impossible, often through techniques that danced right on the edge of ethical boundaries. In his sleek downtown office, Thuy and lawyer Min held strategy sessions that would make your blood boil if you could hear what they were planning. Thuy came prepared with a folder full of fabricated evidence. She had receipts, fake ones of course, claiming to show that she'd spent her own money improving the land during their marriage. She had photographs that had been digitally altered to show her working in the garden. Her face photoshopped onto images of someone actually doing farm work. She even had statements from people she'd paid off. Acquaintances willing to lie and say they'd witnessed her contributing to the property's maintenance. The level of premeditation was stunning. But evidence wasn't enough for lawyer Min. He understood that courtrooms are theaters, and juries and judges are audiences who respond to emotion as much as facts. So he coached Thuy on her performance. Dress simply, he instructed. Nothing expensive or flashy. We want you to look like the wronged wife, not the gold digger. Wear light makeup, maybe a simple aodai in a modest color. When you testify, cry at exactly the right moments. Not too much, or it looks fake, but enough to generate sympathy. Talk about your years of sacrifice and how you gave your youth to a man who never appreciated you. Thuy practiced her testimony like an actress rehearsing for a role. She stood in front of a mirror, working on her facial expressions, timing her tears, perfecting her victim persona. Lawyer Min watched with satisfaction. "Perfect," he said after one particularly convincing performance. "I'd say we have a 70-30 chance of winning this. Maybe even 80-20. The man doesn't even have legal representation. This will be easy." Thuy smiled, already counting the compensation money in her head. already imagining Dee's face when he lost everything his grandparents had built. She felt no guilt, no shame, only anticipation and a sense of entitlement that she genuinely believed was justified. Meanwhile, across town in a modest home, the atmosphere was completely different. Day sat at a small wooden table covered with papers, his head in his hands, looking absolutely overwhelmed. He had the land deed, the inheritance papers, his grandfather's handwritten letter, and statements from a few longtime neighbors who'd volunteered to testify on his behalf. But compared to what Thuy was probably preparing, it felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Huyen sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder, trying to provide comfort and strength, even though she was terrified too. "You have the truth on your side," she kept saying, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Just tell the judge exactly what happened. Tell them about your grandparents, about how Thuy never cared about the land, about how she left you for 3 years and only came back when there was money involved. The truth has power." Dee wanted to believe her, but he'd never been in a courtroom before. He didn't understand legal jargon or courtroom procedures. He couldn't afford a lawyer. He was just a working man who'd been thrust into a situation completely outside his experience. The documents in front of him, the genuine land deed with his grandparents' names, the inheritance certificate that proved the property had been passed to him, the letter his grandfather had written, they all told the truth. But would truth be enough against Thuy's manufactured evidence and professional legal representation? Little Maya had drawn a picture for him, a crayon drawing showing Uncle Day standing tall with the sun shining overhead and the words, "You will win," written in her careful child's handwriting. Day had pinned it to the wall, and he looked at it whenever doubt threatened to overwhelm him. That child believed in him. Huyen believed in him. He had to believe in himself. The night before the court date, Day couldn't sleep. He read his grandfather's letter one more time, drawing strength from those handwritten words. His grandfather had worked 18-hour days for 10 years to save this land. The least Dee could do was fight with everything he had to keep it. But he felt so alone, so unprepared for what was coming. What Dee didn't know was that he wasn't as alone as he thought. Far away, in another province, Mom Sam was making her own preparations. She'd heard about the court case, and she knew her son needed her. More importantly, she knew what Thuy was capable of, and she'd been quietly working for weeks to gather evidence that would expose the truth. She had the original land deed with her name still on it, proving her co-ownership, and the property's status as family inheritance, rather than marital asset. She had old photographs showing the land's history, proof that Thuy had never set foot on the property to work it. Most damaging of all, she had screenshots and printed records of messages between Thuy and her lover, messages that made Thuy's motivations crystal clear. Mom Sam had booked a bus ticket and packed her documents carefully. She didn't tell Day she was coming. She wanted to surprise him, and she also didn't want him to worry or feel like he had to wait for her to save him. She believed Day needed to stand up and fight for himself first, but she'd be there as backup, arriving at exactly the right moment with exactly the right evidence. She'd spent decades protecting her son, and she wasn't about to stop now. As she packed her bag, she whispered a prayer to Dee's grandparents. "I'll protect what you built," she promised. "I won't let that woman destroy your legacy." The courtroom was smaller than you might imagine, but the tension inside it was enormous. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave away nothing, sat at the bench reviewing the case files. Day sat at one table, alone, looking small and nervous in his best shirt, which was still just a simple work shirt, clean but worn. At the other table, Thuy sat with Lawyer Min, both of them looking confident, almost smug. Thuy had followed her lawyer's instructions perfectly. She wore a simple pale blue áo dai, minimal makeup, and an expression of sad resignation that looked almost genuine if you didn't know better. The judge called the court to order and asked Lawyer Min to present his client's case. What followed was a masterclass in legal manipulation. Lawyer Min stood and spoke with the polished confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. He painted a picture of Thuy as a devoted wife who'd been neglected and eventually abandoned emotionally by a husband who cared more about his land than his marriage. According to his version of events, Thuy had contributed financially to improving the property, had worked alongside Day to maintain it, and had every right to half its value now that the marriage was ending. Then came the evidence. Lawyer Min presented receipt after receipt, each one supposedly proving that Thuy had spent money on the land, purchasing tools, buying fertilizer, hiring workers for various improvements. He showed photographs of Thuy supposedly working in the garden, images that looked convincing if you didn't look too closely at the lighting inconsistencies and the suspicious way her figure seemed slightly too perfect against the background. He even called a witness, a man who claimed to be a former neighbor, who'd seen Thuy working tirelessly on the property. The man's testimony was smooth, rehearsed, and completely false, but he delivered it with apparent sincerity. Then Thuy took the stand, and honestly, her performance was disturbingly good. She spoke in a soft, wounded voice about her years of sacrifice in a marriage to a man who never appreciated her. She talked about how she'd tried so hard to make the marriage work, how she'd invested her youth and energy into building a life together. Her voice broke at exactly the right moments. Tears rolled down her cheeks when she described how lonely and neglected she'd felt. She even managed to make it sound like she'd left not because of another man, but because Day had pushed her away with his obsession with the land and his inability to provide emotional support. "I gave that man the best years of my life," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I stood by him, worked beside him, supported his dreams. And now he wants to cast me aside with nothing. How is that fair? How is that justice?" Some people in the courtroom gallery actually looked sympathetic. Lawyer Min smiled slightly, knowing his client had performed exactly as coached. Then it was Dee's turn, and the contrast was stark. He stood up, no lawyer beside him, no polished presentation prepared. He simply told the truth in his own words, his voice shaking slightly with emotion and nervousness. He explained that the land had been his grandparents' life work, purchased with 15 years of savings, and nearly lost to debt before his grandfather worked himself nearly to death to keep it. He explained that it had been passed to him through legal inheritance, that it wasn't marital property, but family legacy. He showed the judge the original land deed with his grandparents' names, the inheritance documents, and his grandfather's handwritten letter. "This land isn't just property to me," Dee said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke from the heart. "It's everything my grandparents sacrificed for. They built it from nothing. They nearly died protecting it. My grandfather wrote me a letter before he passed away, asking me to never let it go, to find a woman who understood its value not as money, but as family heritage. Thuy never cared about this land. She never worked on it, not once, despite what these fake receipts claim. She left me 3 years ago without a word, without looking back, and she only returned now because she heard about the compensation money from the road project. She doesn't want the land. She wants to sell it for cash. That's not justice. That's just greed." But Lawyer Min was ready for this. He stood up immediately with his rebuttal, his voice dripping with practiced skepticism. "Your Honor, the respondent claims this is family inheritance. But according to marriage law, all assets acquired during the marriage become marital property, regardless of their origin. He claims my client never contributed, but we've provided receipts and witness testimony proving otherwise. He claims my client abandoned the marriage, but I would argue that a man who spends all his time on a piece of land and neglects his wife is the one who abandoned the marriage emotionally. Furthermore, Your Honor, the respondent has mentioned another woman, this Huyen that my client referenced earlier. Isn't it possible that this is actually a case of infidelity on the respondent's part, and he's trying to rewrite history to justify his own behavior?" Dee was on his feet immediately, his face flushed with anger. "That's a lie. Huyen came into my life 2 years after Thuy left me. She had nothing to do with our marriage ending. Thuy left because she found someone wealthier, someone who could give her the material things she wanted. And now she's back because that relationship failed, and she sees an opportunity for money. Everything her lawyer just showed you is fabricated. Those receipts are fake. That witness is lying. I've never seen that man before in my life." The judge held up her hand for silence, her expression still unreadable. "Do you have any evidence to support your counterclaims?" she asked Dee. "Can you prove that these receipts are falsified? Can you prove that the witness is lying? Can you provide documentation that your ex-wife had another relationship?" Dee's heart sank. He had his truth, his documents, his neighbor's testimonies, but he didn't have proof that Thuy's evidence was fake. He didn't have screenshots of her messages with her lover. He didn't have photographs of her with another man. His hands clenched into fists of frustration. The case was slipping away from him. Thuy's manufactured evidence, presented professionally by an expensive lawyer, was winning against his simple truth. Thuy allowed herself a small smile, quickly hidden behind her tissue. The judge was reviewing documents, clearly leaning toward accepting the receipts and testimony as legitimate. Lawyer Min looked satisfied. In just a few more minutes, the judge would rule in their favor, and Thuy would walk away with half the value of that land. Everything was going according to plan. And then the courtroom door opened. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the sound of the door. An elderly woman walked in, moving with purpose despite her age, carrying a leather folder that looked heavy with documents. Dee's mouth dropped open in shock. "Mom?" he whispered, unable to believe what he was seeing. Thuy's confident expression faltered, her face going pale. She recognized Mom Sam immediately, and a flash of fear crossed her features before she quickly tried to hide it. Mom Sam walked straight to the judge's bench and spoke with calm authority. "Your Honor, I apologize for my late arrival. I am the mother of the respondent, and I am also a legal co-owner of the land in question. My name is still on the original household registrations and property documents. I have evidence that is directly relevant to this case, and I request permission to testify as a witness." The judge, intrigued by this unexpected development, nodded. "Please state your name for the record and take the witness stand." What happened next was like watching a carefully constructed house of lies collapse in real time. Mom Sam opened her folder and began presenting evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent weeks preparing for this exact moment. First, she produced the original land deed. Not a copy, but the actual original document, yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. It showed clearly that the land had been purchased by Dee's grandparents decades ago, long before Dee's marriage to Thuy, and that Mom Sam's name was listed as a secondary owner since she was part of the household registration. "Your Honor," Mom Sam explained, her voice steady and clear. "This land was purchased by my parents-in-law through 15 years of savings. It was nearly lost when my mother-in-law became ill, and they had to borrow money at high interest rates. My father-in-law worked 18-hour days for 10 years to pay off that debt and keep this land. Before he died, he explicitly stated that this land was to be passed to my son as family inheritance, not as marital property. I have maintained my legal connection to this property through the household registration system. The land's history as family inheritance is documented and clear." Lawyer Min tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced him with a look. Mom Sam continued, pulling out more documents. She showed photographs from years past, pictures of the land in various stages of development, pictures of Dee's grandparents working it, pictures of Dae as a young man learning to farm. Not a single photograph showed Thuy. Not one. Mom Sam then presented the household registration record spanning decades, showing the continuous family ownership and the complete absence of Thuy's name from any ownership documents. But the most damaging evidence was yet to come. "Mom." Sam pulled out a stack of printed screenshots, messages between Thuy and another man, messages that had been sent during Thuy's marriage to Dae. The messages were devastating in their honesty. In them, Thuy openly discussed her plans to leave Dae, mocked him for being poor and boring, discussed her new relationship, and most tellingly, there were recent messages where she explicitly stated her intention to come back and get as much money as possible from that compensation deal. One message read, "Wait for me, darling. I'll divorce that fool and take half his land money. Then we can live comfortably together." Another said, "He's so stupid. He doesn't even know the land is worth millions now. I'll act like the hurt wife and take him for everything." The courtroom went silent. Thuy's face had gone from pale to bright red. Lawyer Min looked stunned, his confidence completely shattered. The judge's expression finally changed. She looked disgusted. "How did you obtain these messages?" the judge asked Mom Sam. "They were sent to one of my relatives," Mom Sam explained. "The man she's involved with is unfortunately related to our family through marriage. When my relative learned what Thuy was planning, she felt it was wrong and provided me with these screenshots. Everything here is authentic and can be verified." The judge turned to Thuy. "Do you have an explanation for these messages?" Thuy tried to maintain her composure. Those are taken out of context, Your Honor. That person is just a friend. The messages don't mean what they appear to mean." But her voice was shaking, and her performance had completely fallen apart. Lawyer Min attempted damage control. "Your Honor, even if my client had a friendship that may have been inappropriate, that doesn't negate her legal rights to marital property or disprove the receipts and testimony we've provided showing her contributions to the land." "Mom," Sam smiled grimly. "About those receipts, Your Honor. I took the liberty of contacting the businesses listed on them. 3 of those stores didn't exist at the addresses shown during the time periods claimed. 2 others confirmed they never sold to anyone named Thuy. The receipts are forgeries. As for the witness who claimed to be a neighbor, I brought actual neighbors. People who have lived near this land for 20 to 30 years. They're waiting outside and can testify that they've never seen this witness before in their lives, and that Thuy never once visited the property to work on it during her marriage to my son." The judge called a 15-minute recess to review the new evidence. During those 15 minutes, Dee sat in stunned disbelief, looking at his mother with tears in his eyes. Huyen, who had been sitting in the gallery, came forward and stood with them, her hand on Dee's shoulder. Thuy and her lawyer sat in furious, whispered conversation, both knowing that the case had just turned completely against them. When court reconvened, the judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. She addressed the courtroom with clear disapproval in her voice. "Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the land in question is not marital property, but family inheritance, clearly documented as such through decades of records. The court finds that the receipts and witness testimony provided by the petitioner are not credible and appear to be fabricated. The court further finds that the petitioner voluntarily abandoned the marriage, engaged in an extramarital relationship, and has returned solely to profit financially from compensation money, not out of any legitimate claim to the property." The judge looked directly at Thuy. "Your behavior in this proceeding, including the presentation of false evidence, is reprehensible. This court rules that you have no claim to the property in question. The land belongs entirely to the respondent and his mother as documented owners. Furthermore, this court grants the divorce petition. The marriage between you and the respondent is dissolved effective immediately. You are ordered to pay all court costs and legal fees associated with this case. Do you understand this ruling?" Thuy stood up, her carefully constructed victim persona completely abandoned, her true nature finally exposed. "This isn't fair," she shouted, her voice shrill with rage and frustration. "That land is worth millions. I deserve something. I was married to him. I have rights. The judge banged her gavel. You had rights until you abandoned those rights by abandoning your marriage and returning only when financial benefit was possible. You then compounded your situation by attempting to defraud this court with fabricated evidence. You're fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt or referring this case for criminal investigation of perjury. The ruling stands. This case is closed. Thuy stood there, trembling with fury, staring at Dae with pure hatred. Lawyer Min had already gathered his papers and was heading for the door, wanting to distance himself from this disaster as quickly as possible. Thuy looked around the courtroom, seeing judgment in every face, and finally understanding that she'd lost everything. Not just the money, but any shred of dignity or sympathy she might have claimed. Dae stood and bowed respectfully to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for seeing the truth. He turned to Mom Sam, and the tears he'd been holding back finally fell. Mom, you saved everything. How can I ever thank you? Mom Sam embraced her son. You don't thank family for protecting family, she said simply. This is what your grandparents would have wanted. Justice was served today. And just like that, the battle was over. Dae walked out of that courtroom with his mother on one side and Huyen on the other. The land his grandparents had sacrificed everything for, still safely in his hands. Thuy left alone, defeated not by superior legal skill but by her own greed and dishonesty. The truth had won, but only because Mom Sam had been there to ensure it was heard. This courtroom drama teaches us something profound about justice and character. Thuy had every advantage: money for an expensive lawyer, carefully fabricated evidence, coaching on how to manipulate emotions, and a well-rehearsed performance. But none of it mattered in the end because it was all built on lies. Meanwhile, Dae had only the truth, his genuine documents, and a mother who loved him enough to fight for what was right. And that was enough. Justice doesn't always prevail easily, and sometimes it needs help from people who refuse to let lies win. But when truth is supported by evidence and spoken by people of genuine character, it has a power that manipulation can never match. So what happens now? Dae and Huyen can finally build their future without this dark cloud hanging over them. Mom Sam can rest, knowing she protected her son and honored the legacy of Dae's grandparents. And Thuy? Well, she'll have to live with the consequences of her choices, with the knowledge that her greed cost her everything, including her dignity. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible courtroom showdown. If justice being served made your day, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see that truth still matters. Subscribe to Life Single Review and turn on notifications because the story doesn't end here. We'll be following Dae and Huyen as they build their new life together. Drop a comment and tell me, were you satisfied with how the judge ruled? Do you think Thuy got what she deserved? And what do you think happens next? Justice has been served today, friends. Until next time, remember that honesty might not always be the easiest path, but it's always the right one. See you in the next video from Life Single Review.